Hello, everybody. As you're joining, we'll just wait for a minute or so for the numbers to increase. If you want to introduce yourself in the chat box at the bottom of your screen, then do feel free to. It's always nice to see who we've got on the webinar. It is a webinar, so you won't be able to see each other. You'll just be able to see myself. I'm Laura. I'm the host this evening, and Simon, who is our illustrious speaker. You won't be able to see me for much of the webinar. I will turn my camera off once I've done the short introduction. But if you want to say hello in the chat, that would be it's always lovely. So the numbers are still going up. We've had 250 people sign up to this webinar, which is phenomenal. We've got 142 joined so far. But yeah, it's just amazing. I've been wondering to myself whether people had enough of virtual events, but I think they've not. Um, if you can see that someone's put their hand up, I I can't unmute you to ask a question. If you want to ask a question, just pop it in the chat box if you can, please. You're going to tell me something like I've not enabled the chat, aren't you? That's the kind of thing that you'd think that after all these years I would remember things like that. That's the problem. There we go. Right, okay, I've enabled the chat. If that was the issue that someone was putting the hand up for, hopefully you can now introduce yourself in the chat. There we go. Brilliant. Great. Okay, thank you. I will on that wonderfully slick start, I will get going. So welcome everybody for joining us this evening. You may have been to cycle touring festival events before, you may not have been to them before, but everyone is welcome. So it's really nice to see you all this evening. So Simon has attended a few of our more recent in-person events. So cycle touring festival's been going for about 10 years, started in 2015. But Simon has attended some of our more recent in-person events, and I think it was clear from the start that he was a perfect fit. There's a certain type of person who gets on well in this community, and Simon was definitely that. He's super friendly, no ego at all, totally willing to just muck in and throw himself into the spirit of things. And I think above all, it was clear that he was just so excited by the idea of taking on cycling adventures, even if I think he won't mind me saying he didn't feel like he had tons of experience. And I think he talked about feeling like an imposter and how he didn't, anyway, he wasn't sure that he was quite sort of qualified to be there in the room, but absolutely, he totally was. And for me, Simon sums up why we started the festival all those years ago. It's because we wanted to bring together people of all levels of experience and knowledge to encourage and inspire each other to explore the world by bike. We were talking before we joined the webinar about this evening about the bike being a tool for adventure, and that's the function of it really. And I think that's exactly right. That's my perspective on these things. Simon came to a few events. He was sufficiently inspired to then head out there, and now he's back to share his own stories. And I just love it. That's what the festival is all about. It's this circular adventure circularity or something. So the Cycle Touring Festival is all organised by volunteers. No one's paid. Speakers give up their time for free because they understand the value and joy of being part of this wonderful community. We don't want cost to be a barrier to adventure as far as possible, so that's why all these talks are free. However, there are overheads. It costs us about £1,000 a year to keep the website going and the mailing list subscription, etc., etc. So donations are more than welcome, and I'll put a link to the PayPal link in the chat shortly. The format this evening is a webinar, so you won't be able to see each other on the screen. You'll just be able to see Simon during the presentation. If you want to add comments, then put those in the chat. If you've got questions for Simon at the end, put them in the Q&A box. At the end, I'll once Simon's finished talking, I'll unmute myself and I'll be able to put questions that you want to put questions. If you want to ask questions of Simon, I'll be able to put them to him at the end. Great. I think that is all from me. I'm going to hand over to Simon to introduce himself more fully and then talk about the wonderful Camino.
Well, thank you very much. Can everybody see a big set of slides saying, well, I won't be able to hear you, but Laura, you can pipe up if we can't hear it. Cycling the Camino de Santiago by accident. So just before I start, I'd like to say thank you very much to Laura and Tim and all the other many volunteers that have made this possible and all the previous years as well. The talk, although it's entitled Camino de Santiago, it's not just about the ride itself, it's how I chose that route, so that process, which I think is interesting as a cyclist. the influences that led me up to from being somebody who took their Brompton from home to down to the train station to be able to do 1,000 plus not miles, kilometers, and how the Camino isn't just a bike route, but it's something much bigger and much more human and wonderful. However, I am aware that not everybody knows what the Camino is. It's or doesn't know much about it. So let's give you a bit of background first. So what is it? Here is a big picture of St. James, and he is, that statue at least, in Santiago de Compostela Cathedral, which is a Romanesque masterpiece built starting at 1060, a couple of hundred years to build it. And allegedly, the remnants of St. James the Apostle is buried there. And you'll see it in the picture there, a person behind them. That's because when you go to the cathedral, you hug St. James, you have to stand in a big queue, and he makes all your wishes come true or something like that. The word Camino is a derivative of the word camino in Spanish, which means to walk. So the Camino is the way, and it's called the Way of St. James. Apparently, it was a Galician shepherd named Pelayo in the 9th century that found the remains, and they were transported to Santiago. And the very first Camino was called the Primitivo, and it was started in the 9th century. So it has a big history, this route. It's not just Sustrans has whipped it up. And there are many Caminos. I used to think there were just one Camino. I remember my girlfriend saying that, talking about going on the Camino, and that was sort of a thing she mentioned a few times. And it starts at Saint-Jean-Pierre-de-Port in the French Basque Country. And I just had this idea there was a Camino. Little did I know there was all these different ones. And especially when I was looking for a cycle route, the Camino just was not on my radar, despite there being so many, because I associate with a walking route. And there are lots to choose from, and it goes on. There are many more, and you can start where you like almost. And here's the official Credencial del Peregrino. By the way, somebody who walks on the Camino is called a peregrino or a peregrina. And if you cycle, you're a bicigrina or a bicigrino. So that's just look out for those things. And you can even start in Norway. So I saw somebody joining from Norway here. So good luck to you walking down to Santiago. Just so you know, I've got it in my hand here. You get your little credencial, and in it is lots and lots of stamps. People stamp this as you go. You pick it up at the cathedral and wherever you are, starting in Seville, or most places have them where you can stay in the albergues. And as you go, people stamp them. Every stamp is different, and you can pick them up absolutely everywhere, these stamps, and they prove where you've been. And why do you do that? Because when you get to the end in Santiago de Compostela, you go to an office, stand in a queue, and then you show your credencial. They pretend to look at it carefully, and then they issue with a sort of religious certificate. That's the one at the foreground. But if you're an atheist, they'll give you a sort of a distance certificate. That costs like €5, whereas the first one's free. So I just took both. Why not? And then you put them on your wall and you remember that. So that's a bit about the history and what the Camino is. So how did I get to be going on a Camino, seeing as I didn't really know what it was? So finding the perfect route. So I was at a loose end in August, and I wanted to go away in September. So I thought I'm going to make one of these big cycle rides, big for me anyway, not around the world, but big for me. So I looked at various things: decent weather, no traffic, nice cycle paths, like a bit of camping if I can. If I have to take a train, not these horrible argumentative train, the ones that have nice storage for bicycles. I don't mind a bit of hills. I don't like flat always, but not mountains. I wasn't ready for the Pyrenees. And that sort of feeling that I've chosen a route where gone somewhere. I made a thing, or it had to have a name. So that made me feel it, give me a sense of accomplishment. Um, and just here, there's a screenshot of Andrew Sykes's website, cyclingeurope.org. I cannot recommend the podcast strongly enough. He's just been on Le Grand Tour, which we spoke about last year at the Cycle Touring Festival. He has a book about it, worth a read, although I've only just made a start. I'm sorry, Andrew. And I found, there's all sorts of people out there that have done wonderful things. Rob Ainsley, for example, he's been for those who aren't cycle tourists amongst us, there are people who do things like cycle to every place in the world called Bath and all sorts of theme cycling. So I had a lot of choice. Where would I go? I really fancied France, actually. It's on the doorstep and they have nice cheese. So let's talk about my influences. Like what led me up to all this stuff? Well, I think I started out by reading Full Tilt by Dervla Murphy, where I was inspired by a woman who took a revolver on a cycle touring on a cycle tour and cycled all the way to India from Ireland, and just the adventures that she had, just wearing woolen clothes and all sorts of things. Absolutely a remarkable woman. That led me into, I became a warm showers host, and here's some people. There's Maxi, she might be with us tonight, I'm not quite sure, from Germany. This is a girl who thinks nothing of 200 kilometers before breakfast. Just amazing. We've got some chaps that came, we're going to Brighton from Leicestershire. The Romans who visited me flew to Amsterdam, cycled all the way to London, specifically to my house, dumped their bikes and flew home again. Then we have the Belgian guy who went from like north of Norway to the whole North Atlantic coast. The Australians in their 80s, they'd done about 24,000 kilometers. Absolutely incredible people. There's Jerome, hopefully he's with us tonight from France. He'd cycled up to my house from the Massif Central in France. And if you notice there in that trailer, that very large, heavy trailer, there is a large sheepdog, 25 kilograms, called Poof, who terrorized my cat a little bit. And he was cycling up to Scotland. So, all these people have inspired me over the years. And of course, our very own famous, A-list celebrities, of course. Cycle Touring Festival, the great and the good there, doing amazing things and keeping the spirit alive. And actually, a podcast that's in my mind was Andrew interviewed Johanna, I can't pronounce her name, Chamara, and she was very inspirational. And we had a to and fro with email, and she gave me some good tips as well, as did Laura and Jill Wright and Rob Ainsley and Andrew and a few others when I was deciding. And of course, if you like the rain, go to the Lake District. Yes, so we'll get past this. So on the practical side of things, once I got that inspiration, I hit the Eurovelo website and I was looking at the weather and everybody was saying, don't go to France because it's too wet. I looked down here at Spain because it's south and it's reachable. And I thought either doing the Lisbon stretch of the EV1 or going up the central bit. I didn't know what it was called at the time until I saw this phrase, Ruta Via de la Plata. Thought, what the hell's that? Went on the website and it's a cycling track and a walking track and a thing for horses and everything else. So I was very intrigued. However, okay, this is going to... I'm saying this for comedic effect, by the way, the next couple of slides. My association with Spain is something along these lines, where, sort of the Fuerteventura and, things like that. Sorry, I'm just saying this is a bit of a joke. My Spanish friends sent me this, saying, Simon, prepare yourself for Spain. This is what I get. No, I love the Spanish. It's nothing like that. But France did appeal to me more because it seemed to be just closer and more practical and greener and things like that, but also wet. So Rob Ainsley's website, E2E Bike, is another fantastic resource. And there he had it, Spain end to end, Gijón to Cadiz. And I thought, perfect. That is ticks all the boxes. But being who I am, and I've done some cycling, but not big stuff, I thought, well, there's no way in a million years I'll ever cycle that. But I can start in Gijón and just go sort of downwards and see how far I reach, maybe halfway if I'm lucky, and then try to get a train back or something like that. And I've got a month, so maybe I make half or a quarter of that distance. So, so let's talk a bit more about the Ruta Via de la Plata. What the hell is it? Because it's labeled EV1, it's a Camino. How does one road get so many labels? Um, well, I'm reading off Wikipedia here, basically. So plata, I believe in Spanish, is silver, but it actually doesn't mean the silver way. It's a what they call it, a phonetically, semantically changed word coming from lapidata, which means cobbles, because when in 218 the Romans conquered, they cobbled roads, and you'll see pictures of that later, how they're well surfaced. And somehow great wealth was brought along these roads, and somehow this got associated, this cobbled word, with silver or with which things of value. This is not my area. Let's move on. So the route today, if you pick up the Cicerone John Hayes guidebook, which is very good, the Ruta Via de la Plata, talks about this pilgrimage path, and there's two variants. There's the one that goes all the way to Gijón. I know that Rob started because he wanted to do coast to coast, Cadiz, but it officially starts in Seville and goes up to Gijón, or you can take the hang a left and go to Santiago. And it became a pilgrimage route. Obviously, hopefully this is not a shock to anybody. The Roman Empire fell, and Christianity gained in popularity in the 12th and 13th centuries, and it became more of a everyday route, but also a pilgrimage route to go to see our St. James that I've already talked about. But how did it become that? So that's how it became the Camino route. And if you want to cycle it, this is distances and distances. This is days based on cycling of normal humans, not like me. You can go there in 15 days from Seville, or 14 days if you're going to Gijón. It's about 1,000 kilometers, slightly shorter to Gijón. Warning, there is a big set of sort of nasty hills just as you come into Galicia. So, and you'll do about 11,000 meters of climbing, I guess. It took me 25 days. Why? Because I rested, I was clueless, I did a few side bits, and I just enjoyed myself thoroughly, really. This is the guidebook, and I can really recommend this because John, what he does, this thing here, Merida de Cáceres at the top, he breaks the route down. He said you can go on the road or you can go off-road. And he also does a hybrid version. So he highlights which are the best combinations of off and on-road. They run more or less parallel to each other, except in certain areas, but you're never far from one or the other. So if you go, this off-road is terrible, you can often, within 10 minutes, be on the road itself. And he tells you what to avoid, which is so useful. So the first step is the hardest one. So it was hard to get going. I was a little bit nervous, I must admit, to doing all of this. And I wanted very much to not be on an aeroplane if I could help myself. So I found out there's a ferry from Portsmouth or Plymouth to Galicia, Santander, Bilbao, the Basque region. And I thought that'd be excellent. I'll start at the top and cycle my way down. That would be a good idea. And I bought my ticket, and it all seemed good. However, my plans had to change. What I didn't have a slide for this, but the Bay of Biscay is notorious for its bad weather and choppy seas. I don't like being seasick. And also the guidebook said go from south to north. So a couple of things. It was dead easy to change my ticket, so I just changed the date and I flew down instead. A little bit of a warning. British Airways say all you have to do is wrap your bike in plastic, turn the handlebars and take the pedals off. Job done. However, the ground staff in Gatwick don't seem to know about that, and they go, "We've never written that." Then you show them their own website where it says that, and they said, "Oh, we've never heard of that." And then ensues some sort of UN delegation to convince them to follow their own rules. So always leave yourself lots of time at the airport because you just cannot be sure. That evening, I was in Seville. There's my bike, all in one piece. Thank you, British Airways people. And I put it on a taxi because it's quite a long way to into the center of Seville when you're quite tired. Um, and this is what awaited me. I went from dreary London to 31 degrees Celsius. It was even hot at night. It was absolutely glorious. The streets were crammed. It was a white night celebration where all the museums are open, drinking, eating. Nobody was fighting or projectile vomiting. And it was very civilized and it was a lovely, the city was alive, very much different from London during our October weather. And my hostel is just above there. I haven't stayed in a hostel since I was a teenager, and it wasn't bad actually. It was acceptable. Let's say it wasn't the Ritz, but it was fine. It wasn't quite as bad as I thought it was going to be. So give them a go for us five-star hotel people. And the first night, the girl there, Olga, wonderful lady, woke up and there's some stranger in the same room as me, and we said hello, and she took me for breakfast. She even paid for my breakfast. So thank you very much, Olga. That was what a treat. So the holiday was off to a fantastic start. I looked around Seville I had a free day there as well before I got going. And then it was to go into the unknown. All the prevaricating, the preparation, the looking at maps and changing ferry tickets. I was on my bike with my bags, water loaded up, etc. And there we go, leading out of Seville. And the paths are pretty good. It's a bit skanky on the outside of Seville, as all sort of industrial areas are, so it's not the prettiest start, but it's fine. And when you're on the Camino, there's signs everywhere. You'd have to be very inattentive to get yourself lost. The roads are the official Camino. Ruta Via de la Plata is the road, and the off-road and the walking path. Both are official. So if you leave one, you go on the other. For those who like to tick the boxes, you're on both. So the question is, all the cyclists go, should I do the off-road? Should I do the on-road? What's the condition? What are the conditions like? Well, of course, it's used by walkers, the off-road. Mostly it's fine for a bicycle, but there are patches where it's really, really difficult. I mean, really difficult. Two people pulling the bicycle type of thing, riverbeds, that sort of thing. But they're very short segments. I mean, hundreds of meters here and there, over 1,000. The roads are great. They're perfect, but they're boring because you don't see anything. You don't see other travelers, very rarely anyway. So they're convenient and fast. So let's have a look. The N630, let's do the road thing. So this is the N630, and it is fantastic. It's the national, the N, Ruta Via de la Plata road. The N525 goes on the Camino Sanabres, which is when you go to Santiago. There has no traffic on it. And why, Simon, is there no traffic? Because the European Union gave the Spanish a load of money and they've built massive motorways, but they're sort of parallel, but far enough away that you don't hear them or see them. And nobody is left on this N630. It is like 1,000 kilometers of paradise. So I did most of my cycling off-road because I enjoyed the countryside, but definitely on road when necessary. And we're just going to look at a few pictures. It's broken tarmac, loose stuff on going downhill, which is a bit scary. So be careful if you're going to do this. Lots of things to see, Roman ruins, and apparently nobody knows anything about that castle. I looked it up. There's Anne, who's from France, who I met on the way. She had a bike with 5 gears to do 1,000 kilometers. Uh, Amazing woman. And then, just walk across, don't get run over by trains. Not, it's not perfect. There's lots of mud when it rains. Who knew? The vineyard area in Extremadura is nice, but it's a bit sandy. You sink down into the path sometimes. To the extent the mud is horrendous, that took me 2 hours to get out of there to do about 100 meters, I would say, because I had to disassemble my bike so that literally the wheels wouldn't turn around. And then I took it to the jet wash and all was good again, but that was that wasn't fun. And then we've got segments like this further north, heading into Galicia, and it's beautiful, and there's Roman things everywhere, but it's tricky on a bicycle, but it's almost worth it just to walk it. Who cares about doing, 25 kilometers an hour when you can just enjoy every minute of every day, even though that's tricky at times. And just beyond this, I thought, oh, great, I got past the branch after doing all sorts of lifting. And then there was a set of bulls just around the corner. We had a Mexican standoff for about half an hour. So, yeah, when you're timing a day, factor in, bulls and broken branches and things like that. And it's not all pretty. Most of it is pretty, but there are some urban bits which are just like, oh my God, let's get past this motorway. And some are just sort of really rough. I've got quite a good bike for this sort of thing, but it can get quite technical. Again, in very short bursts, things like that, where you're just going to push it. And other things like this, which is just lovely, just really, really lovely. And then, places to stop. No, I went on the road just around the corner from there, and I joined the road again, just to show you how much you mix it up. So, where did I stay all of this time? Zooming between these different areas. Accommodation. So, I'd taken every bit of camping equipment I owned. I was like, oh my God. Realized that there was nowhere to camp, and everybody said, why aren't you staying at the albergues? They're only 10 euros a night. I was like, what? What are they? And they're municipal albergues, or they're private ones, and they're dorms. The private ones sometimes have rooms for couples or singles or something like that. The people who run them are officially called hospitaleros or hospitaleras. Sorry, my Spanish friends, for ruining your language. They're often mixed gender dorms. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes there's female dorms and male dorms, but that would be, I don't know, unusual. You can have 4 people in a room. You can have 24 people in a massive room. And no matter how many people are in the room, always there'll be somebody snoring, even if it's you. So, so take your earplugs, take your eye patches, and I took a very light silk sheet because it's light and small. I also took a sleeping bag. I used a sleeping bag once, I think. It was a complete waste of time. They're often got blankets there. They're a bit rough and ready, but they're all everything's clean. There's plastic on all the mattresses, and they're good enough. And when you're tired at the end of the day, you'll sleep on anything. And they have a common kitchen, they have, places to cook, places to wash. Of course, they have bathrooms and so on. And they're very cheap. And they'll stamp your credencial with their silo. And some of them are amazing. They're all monasteries, like this one in Zafra, I think it was in. Yeah, and they're really, really nice. This was the first one I slept in, the top right-hand corner, and I had the whole room to myself, as I did in October in many of the albergues. There's just very few people there, so we could have a whole dorm room to ourselves. And there's often useful information on the walls and memorabilia, and people sign their names. And here's again one in Zafra. This is a former Franciscan convent. And Sandra, who looks after it, the hospitaliera, she was fantastic, looked after us. She cooked a meal for us. It was 10 euros. And you tend to get that 10 euro meal, three courses with wine for 10 euros. My goodness. Not everyone is lovely. This one here, no, I wouldn't criticize the people, but some of them are more. This is on the less luxurious end. It's one single room and 24 beds and 23 sweaty men and one woman who's not looking very happy, one bathroom. And yeah, you can imagine. It's a meeting point, Zafra, of two Caminos. So there's a lot of people that meet there. What I did, and I met a wonderful woman called Anne, we went, let's get the hell out of Dodge, and we rented this place in the top right of this slide, booking.com, split the costs, and it was paradise after that day of getting my bike out of the mud. Just to give you an idea of the breadth, in Fuenterroble di Salvitera, the Santa Maria hostel is legendary. Father Blas runs it. He does a lot of outreach work and things like that. It's a wonderful old place in a small village. And I didn't know, but what I did, there's people you can't see there, all the helpers and everything. I bought a big case of wine for everybody, and we enjoyed white and red wine. Little did I know that the people there working were all recovering alcoholics, and so I probably shouldn't have brought the wine, but they seemed quite happy at the end of it. No, I'm sure they were fine. um, yes. So, and then this one down here with the bull ring, that's a bull ring. That's literally, it's built on the bull ring. So you look over and where you sit and have your breakfast at bullfighting. Of course, there wasn't any, thank God, and it probably isn't used anymore, but some very, very different, interesting areas. There is an etiquette. So here we have Marie Jose, Jose Maria, sorry, in Villafranca de los Barros. So lovely. That's marble lined, 3-story. He comes to your bed and says, please give me your dirty washing. He washes everybody's stuff, dries it, folds it, and gives it back to you next morning, completely for free. This is 10 euros, this place. Some albergues are donativo or just for a donation. You don't have to give any money, but obviously you would if you can afford it. But there are people who can't, so they benefit from that. You can only stay in an albergue for one night. You can't book them in advance. You can ring and say, do you mind or do you have space? They lock you out at 10:30 or 9 o'clock at night. You cannot get in. You're not there, you're not getting in. Well, I managed once. And by 8 a.m. the next morning, it is completely empty. You must have left because they're going to clean it and get ready for the next day. And then you must show your credencial, which is your passport, and you're sharing with others. But that's the fantastic thing. You're sharing with others, you're sharing stories. You say, let's go out and eat together. It's like a living community, but always remember to bring your earplugs. So I'm sure I'm not the only person to have gone on a bicycle tour and went, oh my God, I don't need this corkscrew and tin opener and, whatever massage chair. So they have a wonderful thing in Spain called the Carreros Postal Service. So I went out, this is me, on the, somebody took a picture of me, and I thought, well, there'd be loads of camping spaces, but only in the north was it more camping friendly. In the south, there was nothing. So I just cycled 160 kilometers to Zafra, and I went, oh my God, I don't want to do another 800 plus kilometers carrying a load of camping gear I don't need. So the Sandra at that hostel that I showed you earlier, she helped me. And because these were shots I took later, but I had these sort of climbs ahead of me, and you'll know who are cyclists, not electric bikes. Every gram you carry is a gram that has to be cycled up a hill. So you want to get rid of it. You don't want to carry anything you don't have to. Now this isn't the Carreros that I went to. This is the one in Santiago de Compostela, but they all look a bit like this, sort of yellow. They're very modern. And imagine our post offices where you go in and there's no bulletproof glass. But they're actually like, people are sitting behind nice benches and there's sofas and they invite you in and they're helpful. And they say, what can we do for you? And they speak a bit of English. And this lady took all my stuff, found a box for me, found the packing tape, asked all the right questions, did it really in 10 minutes, and my stuff, 8 kilograms, goodbye, back to England. Now, this is a sort of one for the end, but I'll tell you now while we're talking about post offices. You can go in 7 days a week to Santiago into this Carreros with your bicycle. They give you some tools, you put it in a box, and they will send it home for you for a very, like 100 euros or something like that. It's very cheap price. I can't remember exactly. And they're super friendly. They're open at 8 p.m. at night. It's amazing. But guess what? Brexit, the gift that keeps giving, we cannot send our bicycles to Britain because we don't allow that. So sorry about that, but all you other people from different countries can enjoy the things that we can't do. So, what have the Romans ever done for us? If you know the Monty Python sketch, I'm not going to explain it here, but there we go. So on the way, it's the Ruta Via della Plata. It's Roman. You fill your boots. It's Roman stuff absolutely everywhere. And I'll just show you a few of the sort of standout places. The first place I came to, this is the Puente Romano in Merida, which is in the area of Extremadura, Roman colony in the 21st, 25 BC. And you come in and it's beautifully restored. There's amazing things there. And I'll just give you sort of the tourist highlights, aqueducts. Don't ask me about what all this stuff is called. It's a whole talk in itself, I'm sure. But there are amazing things. Churches, Romanesque. Sorry about the wonky stuff. The next one, Cáceres in Extremadura again, founded about the same time. This is a much more of a mix of medieval, so I was told. I'm not an expert in these things, but there's also Roman things. I mean, these things go back to the Bronze Age, of course, when they were first founded. But this was extraordinary. There's this place, hot tip, full of fantastic restaurants. If I wasn't just on my own in sweaty clothes, probably would have gone to some of the nicer ones. But they are art exhibitions, cheap and Spain is cheap. Oh my God, compared to living in London. Well, I suppose everywhere is cheap, but it's cheap. As in, just very affordable compared to a lot of other places. And it's just beautiful, just absolutely beautiful. I'm sure I haven't captured it. Then there are a lot of other things on the way that aren't big cities. For example, the Arco de Capra, the Arch of Capra. It's a four-sided Roman arch, considered the only surviving example of its kind in Spain. And it was built in the 1st century. And there's a town here as well, which you can go and visit. This is probably the only largest structure that's there. Later on after that, Salamanca, that's a spectacular city in Castilla and Leon. It's a World UNESCO Heritage Site. Again, more lovely bridges coming into it. And they've got, oh my God, cathedral after cathedral, Plaza Mayor, just beautiful at night. You can sit out there and have an ice cream. It's all wonderful. There's lovely entertainers. Just everyday streets are beautiful. I mean, you could photograph this place for the rest of your life and still not capture everything. I cannot remember what this is called. Maybe afterwards we can recall it, but it's one of these famous houses because, of course, it's got this shell on, which is the symbol of St. James and the Camino itself. And there are just so many lovely things. And Zamora, one of my favorites, a smaller place. Again, founded by the Celtic people in the Bronze Age. Unfortunately, the bridge was blocked because I had to go all the way around, but that was a pleasure. And there's a massive river that runs alongside it. This is an old mill that they have there. You can go in it. A lot of these things are free or extremely cheap. And just the very well restored. There's no litter everywhere. I think the Spanish should come and run Britain, but there we go. And then just up here, this is the albergue where I stayed. And that door is firmly locked at 10 a.m. And I tried to climb over the wall because I was late. And the hospitalero, who was a bit of a character, very angrily, he let me in. And I got a good night, sort of a good, well, I got to sleep anyway, eventually. Bit of a fight over how the window was cracked open, but that's another story altogether. And it's just beautiful sitting out there in the evening. Everywhere has a Plaza Mayor where you can sit and have a lovely glass of wine after a day. And there are just Roman bridges as you go everywhere. That these were one of these way markers. Apparently, they used to leave. The Romans would put instructions in for the next garrison, so they were used as messaging posts. So I've been told. So you see these way markers, original Roman way markers, all the way along the Ruta Via del Plata. And then, of course, there's spectacular cities everywhere, walled cities from medieval times. And I've even forgotten what that place is called, but I stayed there as well. That was lovely. Now, this block, why do I have this when I'm talking about Roman ruins? So I didn't take a good picture of this, but where the road is Roman, like 100% verified by archaeologists, they put, I believe, the yellow sticker on it. And if it's green and yellow, it's probably. So they can't confirm that. So the way markers, the modern way markers, give you an idea of how sure you're still on the official Roman road. And yes, and more medieval ruins. And this is a cross section of a Roman road that is in next to, I forgot where it is now, but you can see how they built it. So it was quite an engineering undertaking, at least in part. That's quite amazing. So why isn't the Camino just another bike ride? You know, we go on these Sustran routes, and I suppose no route is just a route. It's an adventure in itself. But the Camino experience is something else. And it's because people aren't just trying to get from A to B and walking their dog, but it's a coming together of people. So this is my first night, not knowing I was on a Camino until these people told me. And I stayed in that albergue and they explained what an albergue was. So that's Anne next to me. And oh, I've forgotten everybody's name. But they were some people from Germany, very lovely people. And so they're called pellegrinos. So if you're pellegrinos, so they're pilgrims. You become a pilgrim if you like it or not, even if it's not a religious thing you're doing. There's something special. You're living life very pared down. You're in basic accommodation. You eat the pilgrim meal very often, which is 3 courses, but very simply. I mean, the third course tends to be a yogurt with a spoon in it. But you get your wine and you talk about things. You sometimes have very deep conversations with people you've never met before. They'll tell you, some very sad stories. Maybe their partner has passed away recently. That's why they're doing this. Or maybe they're, fought and overcoming cancer or something. There's some pretty deep things people tell you. It feels like people drop the everyday pretenses when they're on the Camino and go straight to the meat, the things that really matter to us as humans. And you have a laugh together. And it's a strange thing. So I thought I'll never see these people again in my life. And the next morning I ran, sorry, Anne, it's a terrible picture of you. But this, we're in the rain. And even though I was on a bicycle, I walked good long sections of the Camino, just pushing my bike so I could have these conversations with the wonderful people I met. And of course, I met up again with in Merida. We ended up renting a place. She lives in Tunbridge Wells, actually, and we were on a WhatsApp group together. So, you make some of these connections live on into the future. And it's just, it feels like you add people to a WhatsApp group. I did in my case. And you say, oh, I'll see you in 3 days because I'll be in, Zamora, for example. And you just keep this connection going. The, and, and going and going. And I think Anne, there's another Anne, she'd done 12 Caminos. She was just amazing. People seem to welcome me. This is a chap who is mad about bullfighting. I'm a bit of an amateur. I'm a vegetarian, so I'm not so keen on doing things to animals, but he was very welcoming, and I went in there sort of 2, 3 nights in a row, and it felt like part of the family. This is Luciano and Luciano. One's Spanish and one's Italian, both as the same name. And I spent about 6 different nights with them, just bumping into them, and we'd sleep in the same places, eating and drinking together. Wonderful chap. And it went on. This is an Israeli chap, Gust. Oh, I've forgotten his name. Another chap that I met earlier, and we kept bumping into each other. This is one guy I saw once. He was doing the whole thing. And not everybody's spring chicken. There's people in their 70s and 80s, knocking out 1,000 kilometers. So I'm very impressed. This was a lad who's just walking and walking and walking, been walking for about a year. He was very, very nice. I bought him a beer, and he was just a real big character. Luciano, and again, we had dinner in what do you call it? A swimming pool, because nothing was open. So that was interesting. People from Tenerife that I ran into that come all the way over. Jose there, he was helping me out. Lovely chap. Another guy who just come down from Scotland and taken the ferry, the route I was going to do, and he was going all the way around the world. Just lovely people, and Americans, and obviously people locally that you meet as well. This is a chap who was restoring an old house, and Daniela there, and a few others that I just kept running into, and Pellegrino's everywhere. And he was like the CEO of the Carrefour, conglomerate or something. It was fantastic. I kept running into him. And people with dogs and doing around the world. He was a British chap, fantastic. And he was a guy who lived in England and grabbed me when he heard my English accent, helped me order dinner so I didn't get the wrong thing. Some ladies who showed interest in my trip. A chap who was doing another Camino that intersected, and he was passing on information from previous people that I'd met. And a couple of Belgian couple that absolutely loved. They had the world's most luggage, and they were doing a round the world trip. And absolutely beautiful, bright people. So, what are the highlights? A few things. Every bar in Spain, sorry, I'm being comedic here, has several old men all talking over each other, and at least two televisions playing different things at the same time, and nobody seems to mind. My Spanish friend said that's quite common. Lovely water fountains, and I drank from all of them. I passed, and I never got sick once. So I'm not saying that's a health endorsement, but that was my experience. Of course, the travelers that I met, a lot of interior of Spain is crumbling. It's beautiful, but it's crumbling, and it has a lot of history to it, which is you encounter that, you see it both sort of renewed and sort of decaying as the world changes as it does. And that's sort of beautiful thing to see as well. Every morning I'd have my tostada and cafe, and that was really nice. It was a good start to the day. A top tip, always order a sandwich for the day to take with you, just in case you don't find anywhere for lunch, which you often don't. Of course, refueling stops. Thank you very much, Spanish beer. I got to know my bike quite well because I got it covered in mud. I had to adjust the brakes. Yeah, I got it exactly how I wanted it by the end of the trip. Every evening I would sit down with Gronze, which is there are many websites with all of the hostels on and things like that and the routes. And I would sit down with Komoot and go, oh, I'll go left there and instead of right. I'd take advice from other travelers at the time. Local wildlife squashed on the road. A bit scared about that. And then, of course, endless fantastic views, majestic landscapes, just the change from south to north is profound. There are paradors. This must be the smallest parador. These are sort of converted into hotels. This is sort of more of a guest house really than a hotel, but some of them are very fine. And some of them, I think the oldest parador in the world is in Zamora, maybe I can't remember now, but or in Santiago, but they can be very lush. So if you want to break from albergues, go to a parador or anywhere else really. Waking up to sunrises like this every morning and heading out of town and eating. I would just grab some bread from the local, bakery, tomatoes, a bit of cheese, had a little knife with me, snacks, and it. I've eaten at Michelin star restaurants, and I can tell you, meals at the side of the road, sitting in the countryside, beat that any day. Absolutely lovely, and the Spanish food, even though I'm not a meat eater, that you can eat very, very well. And surprising landscapes, looks like Dorset or something. Galicia is very green, and it sort of feels a bit like home. In the cities, tends to be high quality cycle paths. Not everywhere, of course, but there's, yeah, very impressive. Weird things. I don't know what that is, but there we go. Early mornings, make sure you've got your lights with you if you're going to go out to Spain, because if you sometimes you need to get up early. I had to do 90 kilometers that day, and there was a lot of elevation gain, so I was like, right, get up early. And this Spanish obsession with jamon. I even passed a jamon museum. And all they want to talk about is jamon, it would seem. Have you tried the jamon? Our jamon is better than theirs, and so on and so on. And there are many ways. Cycle, people, I saw people with their dogs. I didn't see any people riding their horse, but there is provision for that as well. And then just the beautiful views. I mean, you're out there. I didn't see a car for 2 hours, and you're just cycling along these beautiful roads over these fantastic landscapes through these ancient villages. And this is a little pit stop. You could go in there, and if you want to leave a donation, you could. But there was coffee, tea, biscuits, everything right down the side of a mountain in a village in the middle of nowhere. There was this wonderful place, and on top of a hill, there was this. This is just one room of many. Every shell has somebody's name and a date and who they are and things written on it. Of course, it's the way of St. James, and there are tens of thousands of those shells. So this history is built into the Camino as you go. And I happened upon this lady's house. She said, "Just come on in." And she gave me fresh lemon, orange juice, and played with all the cats and all the rest of it. And some other travelers came in with me. The hospitality of people is incredible. So I finally made it. I made it to the end. This is the output from my Komoot GPS thing. Seville to Santiago de Compostela on the Ruta Via de la Plata and Camino San Andres, 1,000 kilometers or just over, 25 days, 12,000 meters of climbing, whatever it was. I can also share my Komoot route with others, but there are, if you need it. This is me. The proof is there. I didn't Photoshop myself in there. So I made it to Santiago. Spent ages trying to find that bloody office where I could get my certificate, but and it was a long last day, but well worth it. The beer that night tasted like I've never tasted beer before in my life. And afterwards, of course, there was a big stress of getting my bike home again, but this is back in Gatwick to the cold and wet after this. I had one day of rain in Spain. All the other 30 days was of sun. So that was that. And Laura, I don't know, do we have time for 4 more slides with top tips? Yes, okay. Here we go. Bonus slides. Okay. So I found that I ran out of water, especially in the south. So always everything that was on the guidebooks and on web said that you can get more water here, you can get more water here. Every one of them was dry in the south. So don't go thirsty. Carry that little extra 2 liters or whatever, 1 liter. It's worth it because there's nowhere to buy refreshment sometimes. Also, Google Maps, you think, well, I'll go to the shops because it says it's open at 2. For 1 month, not a single place I went to was open on time. Not just ask locals because the Spanish don't in rural Spain don't seem to update their data on Google Maps. So again, throw some food, bars or whatever in your bike. I'm telling, cycle tourists how to eat eggs here. But for those who aren't that much of a cycle tourist, remember to take extra. And every breakfast I ordered a sandwich. And with most breakfasts, I take that with me. So I always had something. Packing tips. Um, don't carry things you don't need. So have purpose before. Are you going to be a camper? Yes, no. If yes, take the camping equipment. Um, I Packing logically is very good. So I knew one bag was all my clothes, another bag was all my like tools and equipment and bits and pieces. And then remember simple things like put your rain jacket at the top because when it starts raining, you want to just have it right there before and that sort of thing. Have a wet bag. So you can get a mesh that goes outside the alt lead that hangs at the back or whatever you want to do. But when you're wet and you take all your wet clothes off and it's now the sun's come out, you want to leave your things outside so they can drip dry. Um, and finally, I used, sorry, my underpants there hanging on the back. I'd wash them in the night when I came home, dry them as much as I could in the dorm overnight, and then in the morning, if they're still damp, hang them on the outside of the bag. By lunchtime, they were bone dry. And I found a cord to my glasses was super, super useful because you easily knock your glasses off if you're going downhill at top speed. You don't want to lose your glasses and slow down, enjoy the journey. I think a lot of us are going, how many kilometers can we do? Can we do that in 3 hours instead, instead of 4 hours? What's my Strava segment going to look like? Don't do any of that. This is cycle touring. Enjoy. If the guidebook says you can do 100 kilometers a day, throw it away. Just say, I'm enjoying, I did 20. I didn't even move at all today. I'm where I want to be. So make sure you enjoy it. That's the point. I found I was having muscle cramps a lot of the times, really painful and very hard to sleep through. And I did a bit of research, and apparently it does take 48 hours, or it can do, for your muscles to fully recover all of their energy if they've been worked hard. I mean, I'm 80 kilograms. My bike is 17 kilograms. I'm carrying, at the time, 27 kilograms. And I'm cycling up 1,500-meter elevations. And I've not done this before. So no wonder I needed recovery days, but I hadn't factored that in, and I paid the price. And then at the end of the day, you think, well, we'll get there by 6, but forget, you've got to check in, the guy's not in, you've got to ring the bell, you've got to phone the thing, then you've got to find your room, you've got to fill out a load of paperwork and give your passport, you've got to get on the Wi-Fi, unpack your bags, go to the loo, and then find somewhere to eat. So there's this overhead of the day, which I think we don't always factor in. And also be careful. Spend that extra 1 minute checking the bathroom. Is you unplugging your charger from the wall? Make sure you've got everything under your bed. Don't rush. I once went down a very steep hill and only one catch of my very heavy Oatly bag was on. And if that had fallen off, it would have been an absolute disaster, all for the sake of 5 seconds. Again, ferries, trains, planes, go early. Don't stress. It's much better. And then I used to leave things in the fridge because it was quite warm at night, and then leave a post-it note or a piece of paper on top of your pack in the morning so you cannot miss it saying, remember it's, the nice beer is in the fridge or whatever. So there we go. All the gear and no idea. That's me. I was a bit slimmer by the end of it. And that was me on day one. So if I can do 1,000 kilometers and I'm clueless, anybody can do that, health issues aside. So yeah, I hope that was informative and inspired others to also have a go.
Well done, Simon. That was brilliant. The problem with doing a webinar like this is that you don't hear the applause, but I can see in the chat that there's a lot of
Or the
love being.
snores.
Yeah, wait, there's virtual applause. Yeah, that was great. Thank you. And I love that message. That's such a cycle touring festival message that anyone can do it. You just got to get on your bike. And if you can only do 10 kilometers, only do 10 kilometers. If you can only do 50 kilometers, just do 50
Yeah,
kilometers. It just
yeah.
means getting out there, doesn't it? We have quite a lot of questions, if you don't mind. I can throw some questions at
Right.
you. It
Good.
doesn't matter
Right.
if we overrun slightly because it's as long as you don't
Yeah,
mind.
sorry about it. The timing was tricky.
No, don't honestly don't worry. It's not, we've not got any, it's just bedtime next, isn't it? It's not for hopefully for most people. Although actually seeing people have dialed in literally from all over the world, Simon. Like there are people from Canada and Germany, and I assume these are all your warm showers followers.
Maybe. Well, welcome. Hello to everybody. Sorry, I can't see who's dialed in or anything like that. So I just hope friends and family are all here. So, and hello to everybody.
Oh, lots of people. So, there's a few questions. Andrew Sykes has asked about four questions. He
Hey.
thinks he might be the only person to find the Q&A function, but he's not. There are other questions too, Andrew. The first one he's asked is, from what I understand, Simon's original plan was to travel by sea to the northern ports of Spain. If he had done that, would he have cycled north to south or caught the train to Seville?
Um, yes. So Andrew, I my idea was to take the ferry, as you know, and then go from north to south. But there's something about this book, this Rudavia de la Plata book, that was all about going from the south to the north, and it felt like the proper Camino. So that influenced me. And then the second thing was the weather is abysmal for sailing. There'd been a cancellation. I was like, oh my God, I don't fancy that. And yeah, so those are the two main factors. There was probably something else. And it was very easy to change my ticket, cost free. I paid for this, I paid 20 quid more, so I could always change my ticket. And I thought, why not sail home instead of sail there? Why not? I'm going to still be sailing at some point. In the end, I went home a bit early because my dad had a bit of injury and I wanted to get home and help out my family house. So I just flew home because if I tacked on another umpteen days to sail home, it would have been inconvenient. There we go.
Thank you. Um, Somebody's asked what do you think would be the optimum time of year for cycling one of the Caminos? He said that he walked one of the routes in July 2013 and it was very busy and competition for beds in the albergues was high. There was no mud. I guess it's just dust then. And I've heard the same. Like when would you go if you were going to choose a perfect time of year?
I'm no expert on this. Obviously, I don't like baking heat. I don't like the rain and cold. I mean, when I was there, as in Spain, I don't know if everybody remembered in Valencia, there was these huge floods where like literally the city was sort of washed out. So you could go there and there'd be wonderful weather or terrible weather. I do find generally, I've been to places like Japan and so on. I just like the spring and I like autumn because you might get some rain, but that's what I like. Unless you really like the heat, and Spain can get very hot, especially in Seville. I went to the first town I went to, they boasted that they'd had the highest temperature reading in Spain, 52 degrees Celsius. So you don't want to be 8 hours a day under 50 degrees Celsius.
There's no need for that.
Oh.
No, don't need to be there then. Thank you. I think that, I mean, yeah. But a question I wanted to ask, I've asked, this is probably the third or the fourth talk we've had in the last 10 or 11 years about the Caminos. And over the years, as I've added to my family, I mean, I've now got three children, it's become increasingly important to find bike routes that are family friendly. Did you see many families on the route?
I didn't. It was probably that time of year where all the children gone back to school. That would be probably the main reason I imagine because it was October. I did see a French family that had two children sort of on bikes that were connected to bikes, and they had more, and they were sort of doing, I think they lived on their bicycle, they played music, and they taught their children as they went. So they were a very unusual family, very lovely family, but that I didn't see many on bicycle routes. I'm aware that in France there's a lot more cycle friendly stuff going on, but these were quite off-road in the middle of, to me, nowhere. Very rural and quite isolated routes at times. So not probably, you know.
Yeah, that's not massively appropriate. The main worry I've always wondered about is staying in the albergue with the kids because like I share a room with them most nights and I hate that. So the idea of loads of other pilgrims trying to get a good night's sleep, sharing a room with my children, like, oh, yeah, not good.
Yeah.
Thank you. So, a couple of people have asked about your bikes. So someone says your bike looks very interesting. Can you talk about your bike? Someone's also asked, we always get a question about gear ratios. Brenda's asked a question about what kind of gearing do you have and what are your gear ratios, please. You don't have to answer that one if you don't want, but I'll leave it to you.
Well, so this is I ID Works with an X. So it's a German, it's from Bonn, stroke Cologne bike. I went there to the factory to buy it from the actual CEO and uh, spent a lot of money on it. It's got a pinion 18-speed gear with a 639% gear ratio. So basically, it's like having, your derailleurs where you have the big 9-speed and the 3 on the front. It has massive gear ratio. It is a very heavy, it's heavy-ish as gearbox. So there's gearbox in the middle. It's very, very good. I have Shimano XT disc brakes on the front. I have a Son USB hub that's also a USB charger and it charges my life. It's a titanium frame, ergon grips. My God, I'm a nerd. And Ortlieb panniers because you just can't beat the Ortliebs. And then some special mountain bike pedals because I don't like clipping in when you're walking so much, especially in mud and so on. And I've forgotten what they're called, but I can recommend wide pedals for this sort of balancing while you're going down rocky slopes. And I've got 29-inch wheels with Schwalbe Motion tires. They're sort of slick in the middle for road, but if you go down into the mud, they've got knobbly bits, so you still get grip. So they're a bit of the best of both worlds, and they're 55 millimeters wide. And I'm running at 1.7 bar on the front, 2.3 bar on the front back. So I don't know much about my bike, just those basics.
Simon, that's an impressive rundown. I think this is what I love about the Cyclotron Festival. Some people might have answered, it's a green one. It's a green bike that I bought from a shop. But yeah, other people know exactly what pressure they're running their tires at. It's excellent. Although those tires sound very good. Do any of the other Camino routes attract you? And in fact, these are both from Andrew, and you can tell that Andrew has a podcast where he interviews people because these are both very thoughtful questions.
Yeah,
One is would any other of the routes attract you? And the other one is that the pilgrimage program on TV is fascinating, and the most intriguing aspect is the spiritual aspect. Was there anything spiritual about your ride?
I'm thinking of a bit of a rationalist, atheist type myself, but I do. Having said that, I appreciate the spirit of people's personality and considering larger things in life and the human side of things and the majesty of the planet and just how beautiful it all is. So it was very moving in that way, just to be in nature where, normally I'm rushing between, whatever offices and computers and things. So just to be in nature, it was very moving, especially a month outdoor every day for 10, 12 hours a day. I had no desire to look at a computer screen or binge on bloody YouTube or whatever you do. Happy to read a book and just be with other people. And you go, oh my goodness, this life could be like this. And I'm considering, could life be better? Other Caminos, I know Camino Frances is super busy. It's sort of, influences with drones these days and like big queues for every albergue at times of year. That's put me off a bit, but I very much consider walking one of the shorter Caminos in future. So yeah, it looks good, but which one, I don't know.
Okay, good answer. Two people have asked questions about bike storage and particular security of bikes at the albergue.
They all had, I mean, you go inside the albergue. A lot of them allowed you to put your bike inside in your room even. Most had a courtyard where you put them. I mean, I had a very thin wire lock. It's a cafe lock just to stop passers-by grabbing a bike for places like Seville and the big cities where there might be more criminality. But mainly, I never locked it up. I mean, it's got a ton of. Oh yes, the KNOG, however you pronounce it. They do a special thing which I've got fitted. It fits behind your bottle cage or anywhere there's 2 screw holes. And it is a proximity alarm that if your bike moves, it goes, it's an alarm, but it also alerts your telephone, your mobile phone, that your bike is being moved. You can set the sensitivity as you wish. And it's also got an AirTag built into it. So if your bike goes walkies, you literally know where your bike is. And it's screaming like, it'd be hard for them to get it off. So that gave me the reassurance I didn't have to lock it so much because I knew that it wasn't moving, and nobody, if somebody tries to get the lock off, they'd have to move it, which would start the alarm. So I can highly recommend it. KNOG. It's like a bicycle alarm, very small, few grams, well worth it.
Yeah, they've come up once or twice at the festival before, but I think they are great, aren't they? A bit different. Just a couple more questions, then I'll let you go. One is about you heard you mentioned that camping options are limited, and what about wild camping? Like, were you aware of people wild camping on the way?
There is not on the way. I did see a YouTube video of a guy who wild camps the whole thing. I have wild camped a few times. I think Andrew Sykes is not a fan either. It's somehow awkward. Of course, there's the toilet thing. You've got to have a lot of water for washing, for cooking, rehydrating, washing hands, all that sort of thing. So you need to carry a lot of water, I think. There's not usually a water source, certainly in the southern part of Spain, very rare you'd see water. Also, there's not a lot of cover, especially in up to Galicia. It's almost just bare fields and rolling hills. Very nice, but it's not really a place where you could put a tent. And the albergues, they're just everywhere and they're cheap. So sort of, yeah, there's better places to camp in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm sure there's lots of people who would agree. Um, was there any tension between the walkers and the cyclists? Like, did you get any sense that the walkers thought the cyclists were cheating, or
Oh, there was, oh, yes. Oh, we're second class citizens, the Bicigrinos. They're like, well, you're not really doing a Camino, are you? Because, however, in the evening, after they caught me up and I'm already fresh and showered and cracking open my second beer, they would come in all sort of flies around them and sweat and all that sort of thing. And you'd see them sort of take their boots off and peel their socks, and their feet were all in sort of terrible condition. And you're going, thank God I'm not walking with 12 kilograms on my back. So I'm sure it really felt like a pilgrimage that they were suffering every day. And a lot of them later on, when I got closer to Santiago, had done lots of distance. They complained they'd had to stop many times. I mean, this was their second or third year attempt because there were so many injuries on the way. So it's hard. It really is hard to walk that distance. And the cycle just carries all the weight for you. And of course, we know the efficiency savings. It wasn't easy to cycle 90 kilometers up to 1,000 meters, I can tell you, but but a lot easier than walking.
and let
Yeah.
me much faster. I've always thought much faster in terms of annual leave. Like you can cover a lot more distance in your annual leave than you
Yes,
can
exactly. Yeah.
if you're on your feet. And what about with accommodation? Like, was there any like preference given to walkers on accommodation, or is it just first come, first serve?
Nah, this first. And I went in the beginning to the end of October, and there were mainly, handful of people here and there. It was only in Merida there was a full one where 24 people, and we just got out of there. But mainly they're close to empty. I can't speak for the rest of the year but for only 4.6% of people who do go on the Ruta Via del Plata. So you can see statistics somewhere which does a breakdown by Camino and the amount of people that go on it. Because of course there's a lot of statistics for their tourist board is captured. So, like Frances is like 80% or something, and the rest is shared with the various other Caminos. So yeah. So in that way it's less pressure. And there's usually alternatives. You can go around the corner to a B&B for maybe 20 euros and you'll get a private room or something. It's a non-issue accommodation on the route, at least for me.
Fab. Okay. Last question. I'll let you go. But last question is where next, Simon? Where next on the list?
Well, that's the question. Yeah, I've been busy with other things in my life since getting back and going back to work, of course. This felt like such a big thing. I've always not got over it to think about the next horizon, as it were. I even thought, because I'm selling my house, of just sticking the money somewhere and doing around the world like you and Tim. But I'm not sure if that's a bit too much going from 1,000 to how many miles is it around the world?
Depends on which way you go.
Oh yeah,
Ours was 13,000, but that's not like, don't know. It means different things to different people, doesn't it?
exactly. Well, there is no set route, but anyway,
Exactly, yeah.
maybe not so big. But I do fancy following in Andrew's footsteps or bicycle tread, whatever, and doing much more of France because it's close, it's beautiful,
Good
and
cheese.
yeah, it's good cheese. Maybe I go to see Jerome, who was the man who had the sheepdog with the poof, and other people that I've met through warm showers.
Lovely.
Yeah,
But
great.
sorry for there's one or two questions which I haven't managed to get to.
Oh,
Apologies if I've not answered everybody's questions. But thank you so much for joining us this evening. It's been a lovely talk to kick us off this week with the Cyclotouring Festival. Tomorrow night we have a talk about Gibraltar to Gibraltar Farm by bike. So Gibraltar Farm is in Silverdale, which is a little coastal village in Lancashire, about half an hour away from where I'm sat right now. And Tim cycled from Gibraltar Farm down to Gibraltar and then back, and so he's going to talk about that. So, covering some perhaps some of the ground that you've covered tonight, but we'll see. But thank you so much again to you, Simon, for joining us and sharing your story with us. And it's
oh,
so great to see, obviously having been to the festival and been inspired by all of our amazing speakers, and then coming back and sharing your story. It's just brilliant. Thank you so
well,
much,
thank you
everyone.
very much, and thanks to everybody because between all of you, you've sort of built me up to somebody who could do. It's not a massive distance. I mean, most people in this festival they do that before breakfast,
No, they
but
don't. They don't.
for me,
Don't
it was a
don't.
big one, and I thank you for all the help getting there.
Yeah, don't believe it, everybody. Like, and a one night trip is as valid as a 10-year trip. Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Take
All right.
care. Thanks. Bye.